This is Miles Harrington, broadcasting live, or maybe just alive. Day 73. The clock's still ticking on the wall, though the batteries ran out a week ago. I keep it there anyway. Time doesn't pass the same in silence. It just sits beside you, breathing. No alerts today, no drone hum, no far-off thunder of rotors or trucks, or anything pretending to be a rescue. Just static. The kind that isn't static anymore. There used to be a comfort in it, didn't there? The gentle hiss of a station just out of reach meant something was still out there, trying, struggling through interference, but today even the static sounds empty, like the sky gave up speaking. I tapped through every known channel, rechecked the old military bands. Nothing, even the pirate lines, the scavenger loops full of curses and bargaining, dead silent. Like someone took a vacuum to the world. I think this is the part where I'd usually play a song, but I don't think there's a melody left that fits. So here I am, a voice in a bunker beneath a collapsed world, still speaking, because if someone, anyone, is out there, then this matters. Even if it's only a whisper carried through rusted wires and air thick with ash. This is Miles. And if you're listening, the sky forgot to speak today, but I didn't. It came in faint, 2 nights ago, just past 2 a.m. An old station I used to call the East Channel. It was barely breathing through the static, but I caught it, a child's voice, repeating, "London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down," over and over. The kind of loop that burrows under your skin because it shouldn't be there. Not like that. Not from that place. New York was supposed to hold. Their perimeter was triple reinforced, air-sealed vertical quarantine zones, fortified tunnels. But that signal? The nursery rhyme crackled beneath a sound I couldn't place, like metal being dragged slowly across concrete. Then a whisper, too distorted to decode. Then silence. I've played it back over 20 times. There's a glitch in the loop. Right after, "My fair lady," like someone tried to speak, but couldn't, or wouldn't, or had already stopped breathing. And I can't stop wondering, was it real? Or just some corrupted loop left behind by an automated evac drone? Repeating the last thing it ever heard? Either way, the message is clear. New York isn't speaking anymore. They always said cities don't die. They unravel. But what happens when the last sound from a city is a child reciting death dressed up as song? If you're out there and you heard it too, let me know, because I can't carry the sound of it alone. Pittsburgh went dark a month ago. Ren stayed behind. She said they needed nurses more than she needed to survive. We argued. Not about love. That was the one thing we didn't have to fight for. We argued about staying human in a system that treats compassion like contagion. She packed her bag. Antiseptics, hand-cranked defibrillator, 5 bandages short of enough, and said she'd light a lantern in the dark. I said nothing. I didn't have words then. Only fear. Every night since, I listened for her. I don't mean just the literal channels. I mean the silence in between. The way absence has a shape, a weight, a sound. I check her old frequency at the start and end of every shift. 142.9. She never said goodbye. Just keep the mic warm. There are moments, just a few, when I think I hear her voice behind the static, like her breath reached me across the broken bones of this country. But it's just memory. Echo. Hope. With too many teeth. Still, I speak her name, because I think if I stop saying it, she'll vanish faster. Ren, if you're listening, I haven't left the bunker, I haven't stopped talking, and the mic is still warm. The last verified WHO transmission was exactly 15 days ago, encrypted, barely intact, retrieved via satellite bounce by a former tech in Ontario who hasn't checked in since. They didn't mention death counts. They didn't issue protocols. They just said one thing 3 times. Mutational acceleration confirmed, linked to atmospheric drop and sudden thermal reversals. In simpler terms, cold snaps are fueling it. The virus isn't slowing down, so it's evolving every time the weather whiplashes. Permafrost melt dumped more than ancient spores. It released entire ghost ecosystems, fungi, bacteria, dormant strains that had millennia to dream of how to survive us. Then came the atmospheric flip when northern jet streams collapsed and threw Arctic cold down like a hammer. People huddled indoors, shut windows, sealed vents, thinking they were safe. But inside, the CO2 built up, and the pathogen found its playground. The irony's sharp. We heated the world until it froze in all the wrong places. We built fortresses against flood and fire, but we forgot to listen to the frost. It wasn't the virus that won. It was our refusal to believe a whisper could grow teeth. If the signal from the WHO comes again, I'll relay it. But I think they've stopped speaking too. I'll keep the frequency open and the mic warm. This is Miles, still here, still transmitting, still human. This is Miles Harrington, still here, still broadcasting. Just after midnight, I picked up a signal. A sharp blip on the spectrum, not one of the usual echoes from the relay towers. It came from the northeast band, unregistered, barely there, but real. Oslo. The last time I heard from that region, it was week 4 of the blackout. Someone, maybe a civil responder, maybe just a voice clinging to protocol, was reading names from a survival register. Softly, calmly, like they were whispering to ghosts. Tonight, there was no voice, just a beacon. 3 pulses, a pause, then silence, like the heart of a city skipping its final beat. Oslo's grid was hybridized, wind-fed backups, solar stabilizers, and municipal batteries built for extreme weather. At least that's what they promised. But promises don't hold when the sun doesn't rise and the winds die still. I stared at the signal window for an hour. Waited for the second ping, it never came. I checked again. Still, nothing. I've seen cities fall in screams, but this was worse. There's something merciless about a death without witness. Oslo blinked once, then vanished. I logged the coordinates. I kept the beacon's rhythm etched in my head. I don't know why. Maybe to remember how a city disappears when no one's watching. I'll say this again. If you're out there and you saw what I saw, if you heard that same electronic gasp, you're not alone. This is Miles, listening, waiting. They called them green cities. Oslo, Rotterdam, Vienna, smart infrastructure, climate adaptive design, glass towers that inhaled carbon and exhaled regulation. But what happens when a system built for precision meets chaos? When Oslo's grid collapsed, their sealed systems, vacuum insulated, airtight, became tombs. No ventilation, no release. Just rising temperatures in glass cages, built too perfectly for a world that no longer obeys the rules. The virus wasn't even the first killer. It was heat, trapped by design, amplified by density, engineered to conserve, and in the end, to consume. I remember the headlines. Passive cooling will save the planet. They didn't account for the cascade. Jet streams unraveling, polar feedback loops snapping, sudden humid heat waves rolling in like tsunamis made of air. When the external temperature surged and the backup systems failed, those sealed apartments became crucibles. The air thickened, then scorched. Smart windows locked in place. Sensors misfired. People collapsed beside climate control panels still blinking green. No alarms, no explosions, just silence. I wonder if someone inside tried to break the glass, if they screamed, if anyone answered. I used to admire Oslo's model. Streamlined, efficient, cool, even in crisis. But nature doesn't speak the language of efficiency. It speaks in thresholds. Once crossed, it does not go back. We designed for a version of the future we never met, and when the heat came, it didn't knock. It walked straight in through the circuitry we called progress. If you're in a city like that now, sealed, smart, still trusting the walls, test the emergency override. Open a window while you still can. There was a man named Lars, engineer, night owl, smoked too much, drank too little. He ran the back end on the Scandinavian relay grid, kept things patched and humming, even after the main towers fell silent. I remember his voice, rough, skeptical, a little too loud for late hours. He used to laugh bitterly about the new architecture, called it carbon chic. Like putting a silk scarf on a corpse, he once told me. Looks clean, still rots. He warned me months ago that the Nordic network wouldn't hold. Said the buildings were too proud, the code too arrogant. People think they're living in sanctuaries, he said, but they're sleeping in coffins with Wi-Fi. He tried to retrofit a few of them, installed passive exhaust systems, analog locks, emergency crowbars, and sealed stairwells. But he couldn't keep up, not when the virus spiked, not when the heat came. The last time we spoke, he just bypassed the firewall on a tower in Bergen. Said he was going dark for a while. Too much noise, he muttered. Better to fix something than scream into the void. I never heard from him again. Sometimes I imagine he's still out there, tinkering with circuits in a smoke-filled basement, whispering curse words at capacitors, and whispering prayers to broken batteries. But if Oslo's gone, if Bergen's gone, then maybe Lars was right all along. Maybe we were never building safe havens, just prettier tombs. If by some miracle you're hearing this, Lars, there's still static, but I'm still screaming into it. Just as I signed off, half a breath from surrender, a new signal broke through. Not a voice, not even a ping, just 5 words, looped in analog grain. The ocean is rising faster. No location tag, no context. Just the cold clarity of acceleration. I traced the signal's origin as best I could. Somewhere off the Svalbard archipelago. A tower, maybe. Or a buoy that hadn't drowned yet. The message repeats every 32 seconds. Same pitch, same pace, no variation. The ocean is rising faster. The ice shelves were already coughing up cities. New Orleans, Jakarta, Durban. Gone by year 4. But this wasn't collapse. It was acceleration. The kind that breaks models. The kind scientists used to whisper about after conferences, behind closed doors, over cold coffee and shaking hands. Once Greenland tips, once the methane pulses from the Arctic seabed. Lars used to call it blue entropy, water as memory loss, the planet wiping names from maps. I wonder if Oslo's death was just one ripple in a wider wave? If we've been counting cities like falling dominoes, when we should have been listening for the tide. And here's the cruel part. Even if you outrun the virus, the mold, the fire, you can't outrun the sea, not if it decides to come faster. So I'll keep this channel open. I'll monitor the loop. I'll whisper into the storm, because 5 words mean someone's still out there. Recording, warning, refusing to go quiet. If you're near water, listen for the sound of it breathing. It's not just the ocean that rises, it's the silence behind it. This is Miles, still listening, still dry. For now. This is Miles, still speaking, still somewhere beneath the static. Tonight I'm thinking about Sector 17, Nevada, though the maps don't call it that anymore. It was one of the dry zones even before the melt came and turned everything upside down, but they tried. They tried something no one else dared, a water loop, closed system, rain catchers feeding condensers, condensers feeding into biosand tanks, tanks filtered back into human hands. They didn't just collect water, they courted it, spoke to it like a living thing, listened for it beneath the silence of the dunes. Some of them were engineers, others ex-hydrologists, survivalists, even one old priest who used to bless the filtration tanks before each draw. Not for religion, for rhythm. They knew how to solder copper in 110-degree heat, how to harvest dew off tarps when the air dropped just low enough, how to clean pipes with vinegar and stubbornness. For a while, it worked. People drank, crops grew, salt pulled back from the roots. But hope has a half-life in places like that, and closed systems don't stay closed forever. Not when the atmosphere above you is turning into a chemical war zone. Still, Sector 17 stood longer than most. I spoke to them once on a looped relay. They were cautious, kind, tired in that beautiful way people are when they believe in something bigger than survival. They said the dust was redder that week. Said they were testing a new distillation prototype. Version 5.3, Juno called it. And then, well, I'll get to that. But tonight, I just want to say, if you're out there and you remember Sector 17, they tried. And for a moment, they made water from sky. Juno was the voice I heard most from Sector 17. Mechanic, builder, philosopher in grease-stained gloves. She sent me logs, voice clips, half-finished diagnostics, sometimes poems scrawled in voltage readouts, not because she wanted fame or rescue, just because she knew that when the story ends, someone has to remember how it was told. She warned about rising CO2 in the lower strata of the valley, said methane spikes were showing up too, especially after twilight. Doesn't even smell like death anymore, she said. Just feels wrong. They'd covered their reservoir tanks, shielded the catchment pipes, buried extra filtration nodes 6 feet deep. Didn't matter. The water started to sting. Skin rashes, burning eyes, a strange white crust forming along the edges of their UV-treated jugs. Juno ran the numbers. Air chemistry had shifted. Carbonic acid was forming faster than they could neutralize it. The condensers were pulling it in, distilling poison drop by drop. She rewrote the protocol code 3 times, backflushed the system, reversed the pump order. But when the machines weep acid, all you can do is slow the bleed. You don't stop it. She recorded a log, time-stamped and bitter, where she said, "We built this loop to drink the sky. Now it's drinking us back." That sentence hasn't left me. Because it's not just about water, it's about the lie of control, about thinking we can outcode entropy. She stayed behind, still tinkering, still believing there was one more adjustment, one more setting, but you can't debug a world that's come unstitched at the molecular level. This was no storm. It was the slow, polite murder of chemistry. And Juno knew it. There's a sound to it. Corrosion. Not loud, not sudden. Just the long, slow ache of metal forgetting how to be strong. It starts where moisture clings. In the threads of a bolt, the seam of a pipe, the breath inside an airlock. Rust blossoms like bruises. Surfaces flake, bearing down under memory. Juno once told me that the hardest part wasn't watching things break. It was watching them almost hold. Watching a system degrade so gradually, the hope stays one step behind the decay. She sent a clip of her trying to reseal a valve coupling. Every turn of the wrench was accompanied by a whisper. A prayer, maybe? Or just a ritual. She knew the threads were stripped. She did it anyway. I think about that now. How corrosion isn't just physical. It's structural, emotional. Systems rot the same way promises do. Quietly, from the inside out. Trust corrodes, so does memory. A little more every time the lights flicker or the broadcasts go unanswered. I felt it here too. This shelter wasn't built to last, and I've replaced every filter twice now. Even my voice recorder hisses more than it used to. Like it's forgetting the shape of my words. We keep speaking anyway, because the alternative is silence, and silence is the purest form of corrosion. So if you're in a place where rust has eaten your tools, your walls, your resolve, know this. Grief is a kind of rust, But grief is also proof of structure, proof that something once stood. And maybe that's enough to keep going. The final message came in with the wind. It was faint, buried beneath static and the slow pulse of desert air. It was Juno, or what was left of her. No status update, no report, just her voice, software calm, like she'd already crossed the threshold between doing and remembering. I rerouted the loop. Doesn't matter. Tanks are cracked. Filter's gone blind. We're running acid, not water. The solar's choking. The dust's too thick now. A pause. Then, with a kind of broken laughter. Still tried to bless the rig today. Old habits. She didn't say goodbye. Didn't ask for rescue. Didn't rage against the dying of the grid. She just spoke. Like the world was still listening. Like I was sitting next to her, nodding along. I miss the sound of boots, she said at the end. The crunch of gravel when someone's coming to help. Then the signal looped and faded. I've played it back a dozen times, each time a little softer, a little more hollow, like the desert is reclaiming the airwaves. Grain by grain. Sector 17 is silent now. No beacons, no updates, no solar trace, just red dust and memory. But Juno's voice lingers, not just in the logs, in the way I listen now, the way I speak. Because when the last voice in a place speaks without fear, without hope, but with clarity, that's not surrender. That's echo. And echoes don't die easy. This is Miles. Still listening, still remembering, still surviving. And tonight the desert speaks through me. This is Miles. Still on air. Still hoping the static folds the right way. Tonight. At 2:09 this morning, I caught something I almost mistook for a dream. A soft signal on band delta, crackling past the usual bursts of feedback and dust. Not coordinates, not a cry for help, just voices, children's voices, reading poems. One child recited in Russian, another switched into Uzbek, then back again, stumbling a little but steady, each syllable like breath carved into frost. Their teacher, I think, was the one running the signal. Her voice came in sometimes to encourage them, to tell them they were doing fine, to keep reading. They didn't sound scared. That's what broke me. They sounded like they were performing for a world that still existed, like the sky hadn't collapsed, like water still ran from taps and parents were just down the hall. I recorded as much as I could. Even now, I've got the log playing in the background, looping softly. A little boy reads something about stars falling into rivers. His voice doesn't tremble. I don't know what's more fragile, the fact that they're still reading or the fact that they chose poetry instead of protocol. This wasn't a distress call. This was defiance. Spoken softly, yes, but with rhythm, with beauty. If you were the teacher who sent that out, if you're still listening, thank you. Not just for the signal, but for the reminder that even now children can speak back to the dark, and that sometimes resistance sounds like verse. What struck me more than the poems was how they were sent. No compression artifacts, no packet drift, pure analog. A hand-built AM transmitter, by the sound of it. Probably salvaged from a museum or old university lab, then patched with copper wire and stubbornness. Tashkent didn't just survive, it unplugged. I dug deeper after the broadcast, pieced together scraps from past transmissions, fragments from the Central Asian blackout logs. It seems Tashkent went dark on purpose, cut the fiber, jammed the satellites, scrubbed all dependencies. They traded search engines for memory, digital ledgers for paper logs, algorithms for handshakes, barter, community, handwritten lists. A kind of humility we didn't realize we needed, until everything smart became untrustworthy. Smart cities failed fast. But the ones who remembered how to grow cabbage in broken bathtubs, those are the ones sending signals now. I can imagine it. An old broadcast room. Kids cross-legged on the floor. A woman with ink on her fingers, solder, burns on her arms, winding copper like rosary beads, teaching them not just to survive, but to speak. There's poetry in that too. I don't know how long they'll last. They're still under threat from the same skies we are. Same winds, same heat, same silence waiting on the other side. But while the world spun its circuits to ruin, they turned back to voice and breath and blood. Tashkent isn't sending code. It's sending culture. And for a moment, that feels more powerful than protocol. If anyone from that station can hear me. The world you rebuilt from ash and ribbon and ink, it reached me, and I'm still listening. I want to read you something. It was buried in the signal, tucked between the poems. A young girl's voice, clear and careful, telling a story she wrote herself. She called it the seed that didn't know it was waiting. The story was simple. A child finds a seed in the ruins of a market. No one remembers how to plant, so she digs a hole in the concrete using a fork and faith. She waters it with condensation from the wall, keeps it warm beneath a broken jacket. No sun, just hope. People laugh at her. They tell her nothing grows here, that this world belongs to ash and rust now. But she waits, and the story ends with the tiniest sprout. Not a tree, not a miracle, just green. Just enough to make her try again. It hit me harder than it should have. Maybe because I've been talking into this mic like it's soil. Maybe because I've forgotten what it means to wait for something without knowing if it will ever rise. There was no twist, no apocalypse in her story. Just the quiet ache of persistence. The belief that something small can still reach upward. Even when the sky's been cruel. We talk a lot about collapse, about systems and thresholds and data loss, but sometimes what matters is that a child somewhere took time to tell a story and made it about a beginning, not an end. So if you're somewhere dark and you're holding a metaphorical fork, dig anyway, even in concrete, especially in concrete. Because maybe that's what hope is. Not a guarantee. Just the act of planting when no one else believes. Here's the strange part. Scientifically speaking, Tashkent shouldn't still be standing. Central Asia has been a hotspot for methane flare-ups ever since the Siberian permafrost ruptured. Sudden heat spikes, unstable jet streams, CO2 saturation so dense it kills crops before they break surface. I've logged the data, watched the maps turn red, then black. Watch the models collapse under their own variables. But Tashkent somehow holds. It's not untouched. I'm sure the air's thin, the water bitter. But there's life. I ran it through my archive. Altitude helps. They sit high enough to catch cooler currents. But what really matters might be older than all of us. Soviet-era tunnels, buried hydro systems, infrastructure meant to survive war, not weather. Turns out, paranoia can be a kind of blessing. Vaults deep enough to stabilize temperature, stone thick enough to shrug off heat, and old maps written on real paper, immune to grid failure. They're not thriving, but they're there, and they're not broadcasting desperation. They're broadcasting poetry, which makes me think maybe endurance isn't just about shielding. Maybe it's about memory, about keeping the old tools close, even when the new ones whisper promises. The earth forgot us in pieces, but in Tashkent they remembered themselves whole. So, to whoever patched that signal, through the dirt and dust, your resistance didn't bloom from strategy. It bloomed from story, and stone, and survival, written in lowercase letters. And the air here, it's still, but tonight it carries your voices. This is Miles, still listening, still planting, still believing in sprouts. This is Miles Harrington, still here, still beneath the hiss, still chasing truth on frequencies older than memory. Tonight, I have to tell you something that changes everything. Not just for me, not just for where I am, but for anyone still breathing air with the comfort of walls and distance. The virus has taken to the wind. It's no longer bound by proximity, by surfaces or sweat or coughing mouths behind shattered masks. It rides the sky now, glides with broken jet streams that used to hold the world together like stitches in the atmosphere. The CDC, or what's left of it, confirmed it last week. A leaked transmission from a disbanded field unit in Montana. Shaky, half corrupted, but clear enough to make me stop breathing for a full minute. Jet stream instability is pulling cold air south and hot air north, spinning viral aerosols into places they were never meant to reach. Towns that were untouched, bunkers that trusted altitude, farmland where people still believed in seasons. It's not the virus evolving, it's the air itself, fragmented, torqued by decades of warming and forgotten treaties. I used to read maps with confidence. They had borders, patterns, warnings we could rely on. Now the maps are lies, and the sky doesn't remember how to stay still. If you're still filtering your air, don't stop. If your system is failing, find cloth, find salt, find charcoal, anything. It's not paranoia, it's preparation, because the next breeze might carry more than dust. It might carry silence. And silence is the deadliest thing I've learned to hear. There was a man named Ellis. He wasn't famous, not heroic, but he was persistent, the kind of stubborn that makes scientists dangerous, not to others, but to themselves. He called himself a courier, not in the way we used to know it. No GPS, no drop-off tags, just boots, weather gear, and a heart that still wanted to know what the world was doing out there. He moved through the Midwest like a phantom, crossing townships that still had church bells and broken fences, always moving into the wind. He believed the wind had a story to tell, one no satellite could track anymore. He gathered samples, hung sensors from pine trees, wrote with pencil on waterproof paper because digital was unreliable, and unreliable could get you killed. I spoke to him once, week 41. He told me he thought the virus wasn't just mutating inside bodies. He thought the wind was teaching it how to spread, that was learning pressure and altitude, like some ancient instinct reawakened. He never sounded afraid, just tired. The kind of tired you get when your work becomes your only prayer. The last anyone heard, he was headed toward what used to be the Sandhills. Said the wind patterns there were shifting too fast to be natural. Said he wanted to stand where the vectors split. His tracker went dark 3 days later. No signal, no trace, just a blank horizon where his path used to be. Some say he was foolish. That curiosity has no place in a dying world. But I think Ellis did what most of us can't. He walked into uncertainty with both eyes open, and when the wind came for him, he listened. I got my hands on Ellis's last weather log. It came through a scattered ping from an old amateur radio relay out of Kansas. Someone there, a girl, maybe 12, picked it up on accident while tuning for music. She thought it was a bedtime story. In a way, she was right. Ellis wrote like someone who knew the sky intimately. Not like a god, but like a beast that used to be loyal. His log didn't scream. It whispered. Barometric pressure dropping faster than expected. Wind direction variable at 1,000 meters. No longer seasonal, no longer logical. He talked about seeing birds spiral without migrating, about clouds stacking the wrong way. Like someone reversed the atmosphere but forgot to tell the trees. Then the line that stuck in my lungs. The wind isn't carrying us anymore. It's carrying everything we tried to forget. He knew it. Before the data confirmed it. Before the last of the cities still standing behind air scrubbers started coughing into silence. His forecast wasn't a warning. It was a eulogy. For the old world. For the lie that nature would always give us time. I read it 3 times. The 4th, I couldn't finish. There was something sacred in it. Not dramatic, not poetic, just honest. The kind of honesty that bends your spine. Weathermen used to tell us what to wear. Ellis told us where the end begins, at altitude, in silence, with currents we can't outrun. He didn't sign off with fear. He signed off with numbers. And that's what made it real. So if you've got a wind sensor, check it. If you've got a logbook, write in it. Because someone, someday, will need to know how fast the air stopped being ours. It happened last night. A soft sound outside the bunker, subtle like mist hitting metal, but heavier, slower. For a moment I thought it was rain. I almost smiled. Then I remembered the forecast, Ellis's words, the way the air shifts now, silent and unpredictable. I crouched by the vent, not daring to speak. The filters were holding, I think. They haven't wheezed yet, but the sound wasn't fading. It pressed, like breath. I wish I could tell you it was nothing, just condensation, just dust. But the body learns things. And my body was telling me that wasn't rain. It's terrifying, isn't it? To fear the wind, to second-guess the sound of water, the scent of the air that once meant spring. I used to laugh at how people panicked during flu season. Mask up, stay in, overreact. Now I miss that kind of fear. It was simple. It made sense. This fear is different. It wears silence like camouflage, and it moves through the cracks. Sometimes I wonder, did I miss the first signs? Was I too slow to believe the air was turning? Did I play music too long, let hope outpace the science? I don't know. All I know is I still breathe, and that's no longer a guarantee. Tonight I've sealed the outer hatch again. I've triple-checked the filters, but I still hear it. Like the world is breathing back at me, slow, shallow, and not entirely human. If this is the wind, then let it carry my voice. And if it's something else, then let it know I'm still here. This is Miles. Still wondering, still filtering, still alive, and still not sure if that was rain or the sound of the sky exhaling me back. Around 4:12 a.m., I picked up a pulse from the southern band, low, fragmented, repeating at odd intervals. It wasn't Morse, not speech either. It was softer than that, like a body trying to breathe through static. A pattern emerged, 6 slow beats, a pause, 5 fast, a longer pause, then again. It felt human, not just structured, but intentional, like someone left their breath behind as a code. I ran it through my old waveform reader. Nothing synthetic. This wasn't machine hum or residual electrical discharge. This was analog, biological, tired. São Paulo was always too big to vanish quietly. It had satellites, backups, relays to satellites again. So the silence these past months has felt wrong, loud. But tonight, something exhaled, and I think it came from what's left of that city, or from someone still inside it. The signal never escalated, never cried out, just kept breathing. And somehow that scared me more than a scream would have, because screams come from fear. But this came from endurance, from someone who stayed too long, in a place too hot, under a sky too close. If you're hearing this, and if you sent that breath on purpose, I heard you. Not just the pattern, not just the rhythm, but the weight of it, the defiance. We don't always have words left. Sometimes all we can do is breathe into the dark and hope someone's listening. I am. I've been thinking about Anna. She was a linguist, not the kind who taught in bright classrooms with maps on the walls, but the kind who chased ghosts of grammar into fading forests. She believed every lost language was an early warning, like a smoke alarm for the soul. We met before the surge in a small broadcast forum no one moderated anymore. She told me something I've never forgotten. When a dialect dies, It's not just the words that vanish, it's the worldview, the structure of feeling, a way of understanding the wind. When Sao Paulo began to buckle, not from bombs or infection, but from something slower, she stayed. Not to be brave, but to listen. She carried an analog recorder, refused to use transcription AI, said machines don't catch hesitation, don't understand when grief turns a vowel. There were still elders in the hills, she said, still people who spoke tongues no nation tracked. They were already vanishing before the collapse. And when the noise came, the heat, the ration riots, the blackout, their voices were the first to go quiet. Anna believed the end wouldn't sound like screaming. It would sound like nothing. A frequency once filled, now lost. She sent me her last note on day 60, said she'd archived 42 dialects, said she wasn't done. I wonder if she was the one breathing into the static, or if she's gone now, her language filed away in a drawer no one will ever open again. We mourn cities. We rarely mourn syntax, but tonight I do. Because Anna was right. When we lose a language, we lose a way of knowing the world. And we need all the knowing we can get. Sao Paulo didn't fall to the virus. Not exactly. It fell to accumulation, to pressure and plastic and price tags and policy gaps no one fixed in time. The towers were smart, too smart, maybe, sealed tight for climate control, designed to regulate oxygen, humidity, even serotonin levels in premium zones. But when the grid stuttered, when brownouts turned to blackouts and the backup systems failed, those towers became ovens. The outer slums dried first, pipes cracked, wells collapsed into themselves, and the heat began to rise from the ground like a warning. Humidity turned fatal, a wet bulb event that didn't announce itself with flames, just a slow suffocation. But it wasn't just heat, it was food. Imports stopped, rooftop gardens withered, water storage turned fungal, not the good kind. Reports came in, whispered, fragmented, about spores blooming in sealed apartments, not airborne at first. Then they were hallucinogenic, psychotropic. People started seeing things in the walls, stopped trusting their own children. Some believed the mold was speaking to them, promising relief in exchange for stillness. I don't know what's true. I only know Sao Paulo's signal vanished before the military even responded, if they ever did. Anna said it best in one of her messages. When a city forgets how to sweat, it forgets how to survive. We engineered comfort like a cage. And when the door locked from the inside, no one remembered the code. If you're near one of those towers, listen to the walls, not for ghosts, for pressure. Because collapse doesn't always roar, sometimes it hums. I found it buried in the old bandwidth logs. A transmission from 40 days ago, thin as thread, but intact. It was Anna. She wasn't teaching. She wasn't translating. She was singing a lullaby in a language I didn't recognize. Might have been Tupiniquim, maybe Kaingang, or something older, spoken by only a few hearts now, silenced. The melody was simple, repetitive, the kind of tune that rocks a child even when the words don't mean anything yet. She was alone. You could hear it in the air. No background noise, no breath but hers. Just one voice trying to carry something across a dying world. It wasn't perfect. She faltered once, caught her breath, said softly, "I don't know who I'm singing for anymore." Then she kept going. I played it 3 times tonight, not to decode it, not to archive it, just to feel it. It reminded me of the bedtime songs my mother used to hum when we lived above the train yard, when the sound of steel on steel felt like thunder you could trust. This lullaby wasn't hope. It wasn't even grief. It was something older than both. It was a thread tied to the past, dragged through silence, and whispered into the dark. If you're out there, if you've ever sung to a child or to yourself just to feel human, then you understand. Some transmissions don't ask for reply. They only ask not to be forgotten. This is Miles, still listening, still learning the words, still holding the lullaby. And tonight, in this bunker beneath the breathless sky, I am not alone. Last night, just past 3 a.m., something slipped through the static. A whisper, not the usual burst of broken pings or corrupted weather logs. This was warmer, older, careful, like someone carrying light cupped in their hands. The source was unclear. The bandwidth unregistered. No identification. No encryption. Just a voice, soft, deliberate, filtered through snow-crackled silence. Frequency 9, it said. That's all. Then a long pause. Then a few words more. Coordinates I can't verify. A description. A hydroponic sanctuary tucked into the Alps. A monastery of soil and spores and song. It sounded like a myth. Like something meant to comfort dying soldiers or lost children. But it wasn't just a story. The voice listed plants. Real ones. Cress, spinach, calendula. Fungi strains crossbred to cleanse air and leach heavy metals from snowmelt. There were no pleas. No grand promises, only a whisper. We grow things still. I froze, not from fear, but from a quietness I haven't felt in a long time. The kind that settles when someone speaks without asking to be heard. Frequency 9. I've marked it now. I'll keep tuning in, tracking the drift, mapping the echoes, because maybe what I heard wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was just persistence. And persistence is sometimes all we have. The second transmission came 12 hours later. Same voice, same slow cadence, like the speaker wasn't rushing against collapse but had made peace with it. He introduced himself only as Brother Elias. He spoke not of salvation, but of stewardship, of mycelium bred not to feed, but to heal. He described how spores, carefully nurtured and crossbred in underground labs, now line the walls of their monastery. How they cleanse the air, consume carbon, metabolize toxins that used to render breath a liability. Mycelium, he said, is the language the soil uses to remember its own repair. He described bioluminescence where lanterns used to be, nutrient film systems sustained by meltwater, silent corridors where photosynthesis and prayer are one and the same. It wasn't doctrine, it was design. He talked like a scientist who lost his lab and found purpose in the dirt. And maybe he was. The Alps make sense. Altitude for air clarity. Old Cold War bunkers repurposed for thermal regulation. Low seismic activity for structural preservation. Still, it feels impossible. Too serene. Too clean. He didn't speak of danger. He didn't speak of isolation. Just spores and breath and the slow work of keeping green alive. But it was the quiet in his voice that stayed with me. Not the silence of loss, but the hush of patience, of tending, not taking. Fungi are older than fire, he said, and more forgiving. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that something, somewhere, might still be growing. After the third transmission, I sat here for hours. Birdsong drifted in through the static. Real birds, real cadence, not loops or audio splices. Organic rhythm. A thrush, maybe something else. Then poetry. Soft lines read aloud, no introduction. Words about ash turning to earth, and earth to roots, and roots to breath. That's when I began to doubt myself. What if it's a signal distortion? What if it's an echo from the past? Some old loop caught in atmospheric interference? Hope has a cruel way of dressing itself in frequency. It mimics the things you long for. A voice, a leaf, a human cadence. Still, something in me wanted to believe. Not in perfection, not in safety, but in the idea that somewhere someone is not just surviving the end, but cultivating what comes after. It made me think about all the seeds I've kept. Old packets, dated, maybe sterile now. But I kept them like charms. Reminders that growth once came in colors. I don't know if Frequency 9 is real, but I know this. We need stories like theirs to exist. Because without something green, on the other end of all this gray, what are we breathing for? So I've tuned their signal into the loop. It'll run with my voice now. Birdsong and spores and all. If it's real, maybe someone else will hear it. And if it's not, maybe it will inspire someone to build it anyway. Because sometimes belief isn't about facts. It's about what you plant, even when you doubt it will bloom. This is Miles Harrington, day 82, broadcasting from Sector Theta 4. Still breathing, still reaching. If you're alive, if you've been listening, if the air hasn't turned against you and your signal's strong enough, speak back. I've spent so many nights cataloging loss, naming ghosts, counting the dead by silence. But tonight, I want to name something else. Possibility. Because if there's a monastery in the Alps, breathing through spores and prayer, if there are gardens still glowing in the dark, then we are not finished. You don't have to be clean. You don't have to be whole. You just have to be there. Leave your voice on the air. Doesn't matter if it's broken. I'll stitch it into the static. I'll make it part of the map again. For too long, I've spoken to remember, to archive, to mourn. But now, I speak to connect, to tether what remains. If you hear this, build a transmitter. Find a hill. Light a candle and speak. Tell me what still grows. Tell me what still sings. Tell me if your seeds have sprouted in ash. And if not, tell me that you still want them to. This is Miles, still broadcasting, still surviving, still believing that breath and signal are sacred. And for the first time in too long, I'm not just remembering the world. I'm answering it. There's a myth we loved, back when myths were entertainment, not diagnosis. That the end would be loud, explosive, sudden, a flash, a siren, a scream. But the truth was quieter. The end didn't come. It unfolded. Not like a curtain, but like rust. Slow, intimate. It slipped in through our systems, through cracks we refused to seal, through warnings we mislabeled as noise. The virus didn't destroy us. It revealed us. It arrived like a mirror held up too close to look away. And what it showed was a world already leaning, already brittle. A world distracted by convenience, by spectacle, by a promise of continuity we never earned. You could see it in the fields that dried from the bottom up, in the rivers that turned to math problems, in the fish that forgot how to migrate, in the way people stopped looking up, stopped remembering how seasons should feel. By the time the first cities locked down, the soil was already starving. By the time the governments argued about containment, half the bees were gone. And by the time we started broadcasting warnings, the receivers had been sold for parts. No, the end didn't erupt. It eroded. And maybe that's why it's so hard to mourn it cleanly. Because it didn't steal everything all at once. It just kept asking for one more compromise, one more silence, one more shrug, until all that was left was a voice in the dark, trying to name what never had a funeral. I have a letter. It's yellowed, edges curled like old leaves. My mother's handwriting. Steady, looped, a little too formal, as if she was still trying to write for someone else's eyes. She wrote it before the shortages began, before the walls turned to lists, before the broadcasts started sounding like elegies. She tucked it into the side pocket of my travel pack the day I left home. I didn't find it until months later. By then, she was gone. The letter says this: collapse doesn't start with fire. It starts when we forget what held us together. It starts in the small silences, the ones that go unspoken because they feel too obvious to name. She wrote about her father's garden, how he used to test the soil by smell. Said he could tell when rain was coming just by the way the air shifted under the porch. She said we were losing the kind of knowing that doesn't need graphs or feeds or approval, losing the habits of care, The ones that kept bread rising and neighbors checking on each other and stories passed down without needing to be recorded. If it ever starts to unravel, she wrote, don't try to remember everything. Just remember something. One thing, one person, one place that made you feel like the world had a shape. I've read this letter maybe 50 times, and each time it feels more prophetic, more like a blueprint for mourning. I don't know if my mother made it to shelter, but I know she knew how to see endings before they arrived. And I know now that memory isn't just for comfort, it's resistance. We always blame the systems, the grids, the pipes, the power. But tonight, I want to say this plainly. The systems didn't fail us. We failed them first. They were reflections of our priorities, of our distractions, of how little we were willing to sacrifice to make something last. I remember watching a man argue on a panel once, streamed live. Back when that meant anything, he said, infrastructure is a mirror. If it breaks, it's because we stopped seeing ourselves clearly. I laughed at the time. Now, I think he might have been the only one telling the truth in that whole room. It wasn't the steel that corroded first. It was empathy, the belief that someone else's suffering could one day be your own. That borders leak. That climate doesn't negotiate. We built too narrowly, planned for markets, not margins, optimized for performance, not persistence, and when the signals started failing, when the skies changed color and the data stopped aligning, we blamed the math. But it was always us, our detachment, our pride, our refusal to believe that tomorrow could ever stop arriving. I've seen it even now, in the way survivors hoard knowledge, in the way some of us still cling to hierarchy, like it's a raft. But knowledge without compassion is still collapse. It just happens slower. So if you're listening, wherever you are, and you're trying to rebuild something, anything, don't just restore the wires and walls, rebuild trust, rebuild memory, rebuild the thing in us that wanted to build for each other in the first place, because the systems aren't separate from us. They are us. And maybe the worst collapse was the one inside. I lit a candle tonight, not for light. The solar battery's still holding, not for heat. The air's dry and the vents haven't wheezed in 2 days. I lit it for something else, for presence. I set it down next to my microphone, let it flicker while I spoke, watched it sway with my breath, a tiny pulse against all this stillness. And I thought, maybe this is what faith looks like now. Not a sermon, not a monument, just a single flame kept alive because it means something to someone. There are days I forget names. Mine, yours, even hers. I forget the taste of summer peaches, the sound of traffic humming beneath my bedroom window, the weight of a book in hand, read with no urgency. But this flame, it reminds me that remembering is still an act of defiance, that even if the world has become ash and archive, if we light one candle and mean it, we keep the thread alive, the thread that ties the past to what comes next. Not because we know what's coming, but because we dare to believe there is a next. I'm tired, but not gone. And tonight, that's enough. So if you've forgotten the shape of your own voice, light something. Say a name. Speak a story, even if no one's there to catch it. This is Miles. Still here, still lit, still holding memory like a flame cupped in both hands. It is small, but it burns. And while it burns, so do I. This is Miles Harrington, 3:14 a.m., a time that shouldn't matter anymore, but tonight it does. A signal broke through the static just once. No voice, no repeat, just numbers. Latitudinal coordinates punched into the dark with mathematical clarity, like someone whispering hope in code. Eastern Greenland, remote, frozen, forgotten by most of the maps still intact, not a voice calling for help. Not a pattern asking to be answered, just data. Silence wrapped around meaning. It didn't feel accidental. Didn't feel like a glitch. It felt like an invitation. For hours, I've stared at the readout, ran it through the overlay, matched it against what's left of the topographical database. It points to a basin, ice-sheltered geothermal vents nearby. A place that could, just maybe, still breathe. But there's no name, no call sign, just space. And space, these days, is sacred. I haven't moved from this room in over 70 days. But something about that transmission, its stillness, its certainty, it tugged at something buried under the routine of surviving. What if it's a trap, a malfunction, or worse? What if it's nothing at all? But what if it's not? What if someone's waiting? What if the map is real? See, I've marked it. I've logged it. And maybe I'll go. Not because I'm sure, but because I need to find a question big enough to chase. It came in through an old relay. Cache. Low orbit packet ping. Frozen in queue somewhere over northern Europe. 40 days delayed. But it reached me. And it was her. Ren. A letter. Stitched from fragments of bandwidth and human ache. Typed. Simple. But laced with her rhythm. That quiet defiance, that stubborn grace. If you're still speaking, she wrote, then someone is still listening. And that means the world isn't over yet. She talked about the clinic, how the power finally failed, how they kept one generator for the children's IV pumps, rationed breath like medicine, how she sang lullabies with no melody, just breath turned soft for comfort. She never said goodbye, only, I hope you still speak, even if it's only to yourself, even if the radio is cracked and the sky doesn't answer. Speak anyway. That's how we keep time. Ren always believed in the human voice, said it was older than any god, said it carried shape even when words didn't. I don't know where she is now, if she's still alive. If the letter was her last act of faith, flung into the sky on solar wings. But tonight, her voice braided with mine, and I remembered how it feels to be witnessed, to matter. I've printed her words, taped them to the wall, and when the static thickens too loud for memory, I read them back. Because if the world can carry her voice to me, even 40 days late, then maybe nothing is too lost to reach us. The pack is by the door. Water, solar filament, the last 2 oxygen canisters, rations calculated down to the last grain. I haven't opened that hatch since the day the wind changed. Since breathing outside became an act of blind faith. Since the virus learned how to ride the air. And now I have to ask, do I believe in what I heard enough to follow it? Do I believe in the map with no message? Do I believe in the silence of a dead woman's letter carried across stars? Or am I chasing ghosts, like so many before me? There's safety in here, monotony, filtered breath, a radio and a voice and the repetition of ritual, a bunker life measured by signal strength and voltage readouts. But is it life, or just a well-managed pause? Ren's letter won't stop echoing. If you're still speaking, then someone is still listening. That someone could be a child in an outpost, or a scientist in the cold, or just the wind, looping back to mimic us. Still, if belief doesn't move us, then it's not belief. I walk to the hatch sometimes, touch it, test the seal, listen for what I can't explain, and tonight, the silence beyond it feels different, not safer, not louder, just waiting. Maybe the bunker kept me alive, but maybe it's time to ask whether staying is just another way of dying. I haven't turned the handle yet, but my hand is on it, and that's something. This is Miles Harrington. Day 73 since the last siren. Day 82 since I heard a name spoken back. Final log before departure. I've packed light, voice recorder, water purifier, Wren's letter, and a copy of the coordinates etched into the back of my wrist because batteries fail, but ink endures. This isn't surrender. It's continuation. There's no certainty where I'm going. Only a whisper wrapped in math. Only a direction. But what I've learned, what the silence taught me, is that not all maps show roads. Some maps show choice, and some choices show who we still are, even after everything else is gone. I leave this frequency open, wideband, auto loop. My voice will broadcast on repeat every 12 hours. So if you come across the signal, you'll know someone was here, and that someone believed the end was not the whole story. If I make it, I'll return to this frequency, same station, same time, and I'll tell you what I saw. If I don't, then let this be my ember, my proof that I lit the match, that I tried. To the ones still listening, keep your radios warm. Speak even when it feels like no one hears, because someone might. And if they do, they might come looking. This is Miles Harrington, signing off from the bunker, signing on to something bigger than walls. If you hear this, meet me where the static clears.